Hey there! We'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. By subscribing, you're helping us spread the word and connect with more amazing people like you.
Welcome to We Be Parents, where parent doctors Matthew Letterman and Alona Pulday explore current parenting topics, share stories, and help bring families closer together.
Welcome back to We Be Parents, the podcast where we explore connection across the full web of family, whether that's with your kids, your partner, or your parents. Hi, I'm Dr. Alona Pulday.
And hi, I'm Dr. Matthew Letterman. In the last episode, we had the pleasure of talking with comedian, writer, and father Chris Spencer about how humor shows up in parenting, marriage, and generational patterns.
Today, we're doing something a little different. We're going to take a moment to reflect on the conversation we had with Chris and then expand it into a deeper look at how humor works inside family systems as a bridge, a buffer, and sometimes a block.
Yeah, I found it really fascinating. I was going in expecting it to be more of a sort of lighthearted, fun conversation with Chris. And although it was, what really hit me was the impact humor has as a strategy to meet so many needs. So in nonviolent communication, we talk about meeting needs. And in our collaborative, non-permissive connection strategy or our approach, it's all about caring about everybody's needs. And humor was this like super strategy to meet needs ranging from authenticity to connection, to building trust, to self-expression. I mean, so many beautiful needs can be met through humor.
Absolutely.
Emotional safety.
Absolutely. And I think it's a conversation that really matters across so many relationships. With our kids, humor can often soften shame as it sparks and builds connection and trust. And it opens an emotional space when it's used with attunement, right? But an emotional space where kids can feel safe and seen. And it allows for those awkward moments to just soften and be met with the authenticity. So I love it. And, with partners, jokes can offer relief, intimacy, warmth. They can make space for mistakes. It's really, it serves so many wonderful purposes.
Yeah. And interestingly, humor has a double edge. It can also block connection sometimes or guard the heart from going vulnerable. It can be misinterpreted, which then can lead to offense. I mean, I loved the Robin Williams story about what got him back to Los Angeles to perform.
Yes.
Because humor, there was some barriers to understanding the humor that led to misunderstandings. So it's fascinating. I didn't realize humor was such a complex sort of experience.
And so I kind of want to tease out, some of the things that we just brought up around the many facets where humor can be super valuable. We'll start with where it can be super valuable, and then we can talk about blocks and miscommunication through humor. But when it really works, and I loved, Chris gave a couple of examples, and I was thinking of opportunities with our own girls where it works. It can really meet a need for connection without triggering defensiveness or shame. And I'm connecting to one of the last things that Chris said was that sometimes he uses his humor to make space to laugh at yourself, to kind of invite and make that okay. And in that particular example, he was talking about, telling his mom that he didn't enjoy her casserole and she shouldn't cook it anymore. And, in creating space for her to say, oh yeah, maybe I left the oven on for too long, or maybe I put it, it was up too high, or whatever it was. But a space where she could own a mistake without feeling that defensiveness or shame, but instead join in the joke.
Yes. Is that oven stuck on 700 again?
Yes. Yes.
And it's interesting because we talk about nonviolent communication and how to use the classical language of nonviolent communication, but through humor and jokes, you can achieve the same type of connection, even if the words are very different.
Well, and that's ultimately Marshall Rosenberg's, the kind of founder and father of nonviolent communication. That was his message. It's not about the words. It's about the intention behind the words. And this was a perfect example of how you can use words in so many ways, and it can be delivered in so many different tones and environments and settings, and still be received in that connected way.
Yeah, because behind his joke or his joking was, I care about you still.
Mm-hmm.
But some people have been the butt of jokes, and it's clearly to make the other person feel some type of pain, or you have animosity or resentment, and there a joke could land really poorly. But Chris, what I like about his humor is that there's care. It's not about trying to put people down or make them feel bad, and that sounds like that's the family culture.
Yeah, to use humor to invite connection, not to use humor to mask criticism or judgment or blame.
Yeah. That was a big shift in my humor, I think, early on when we met.
Yes. That was a yes for you listeners who couldn't hear it.
Early on, my joking style was to put things down, to make fun of, to laugh at people's expense. And you definitely did not enjoy that humor. And then I learned.
But let's keep going. And no, I did not enjoy that humor, because that's not the humor that I grew up with. It felt biting, and what was your response to that?
My response was, I completely understand where you're coming and I will change the.
Oh no, my friend. Our wonderful audience.
We must have a different memory of what it has.
He complained to a friend of ours that he married someone who doesn't have a sense of humor.
Oh, yeah. That's what I said. Oh, it's all coming back now.
Yes.
So basically, you didn't use humor the same way I did. And because for you it was important to care and the kindness and joking, you wanted to mix all those together. And it was much easier for me to make jokes, at people's expense. And at the time, I wasn't, connected to my needs, let alone other people's needs very well. I was using humor a lot to avoid going vulnerable. I was using humor to mask social discomforts. I was using humor for lots of things, but it was more coping than it was connecting. And I think as I've grown, my sense of humor has shifted. And I think there's a way, because you can still make fun, like you said, you can still make fun of people if we're laughing together. And I think there's a little bit of an art. And then knowing, hey, how is that caring about how that's landing? And everybody knows when they make a joke and someone else is laughing, but they're feeling hurt or awkward, you can sense it energetically.
Absolutely. But I think you also bring another use that people have with humor. We use humor often to mitigate awkward situations, to make it easier to step into them. But sometimes there's still a groundedness and a intention to connect. And sometimes it's again to relieve you of your pain, or and that might come out as criticism or judgment, or might not land well. Which was another thing that Chris addressed. Not every one of the jokes lands well. And
he said he was 9 out of 10 though, so he was pretty good. But he's a professional. He's a professional.
Well, he said after many years, yes, he's about an 8 to 9 out of 10.
So that's pretty good.
And then he named his own Eric. No, I'm kidding. But yes, and that there are those misses, but even in those misses, you've established so much trust. There's so much trust kind of garnered in that relationship that it's okay to make the mess. And that's, it becomes acceptable, and you trust that you can repair even when there's a miss.
Yes. And then you can use humor in the repair if you want.
Absolutely.
I think the key is, what are the needs you're meeting behind it? And to be clear, if you're using humor to avoid vulnerability, that's okay too. That's providing some relief. Maybe you don't want to go vulnerable. But if you're struggling to go vulnerable and humor always shows up and prevents that self-connection or that connection with other people, because vulnerability is very important for connection, then it's time to look at your discomfort with that deeper vulnerability. Again, not pushing yourself, but just to be aware that that exists.
It's interesting that you say that. I was connecting to a moment. It was shortly after my dad died, and I was seeing a therapist, to kind of process the emotions. And I remember them calling me on that, that they looked and they were like, oh, I'm noticing that you smile or giggle or laugh off something that is actually really probably painful. And that I was using humor in that way, to kind of slide it off, not to make it as painful, to blunt it.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even notice that I was doing that until it was called out to me. So humor is definitely used in a variety of, to meet a variety of different needs. In that case, it was really relief of significant pain.
Yeah, and self-protection. Mm-hmm. That happens with kids a lot. They'll be getting yelled at, and they're so uncomfortable, they start laughing to release tension. And parents will think that they're not taking them seriously, and then yell even more or get really upset when the kid is just trying to care for themselves and protect themselves from the shame and the discomfort and the tension that they're feeling that's building up in their bodies.
Yeah, that's a really great point.
And when you're aware of all of that, it doesn't mean you can't be upset. It doesn't mean you can't talk to your child about what happened. But to know that if connection is your goal, then continuing what you're doing is not enhancing connection, which means that your child, if it's feeling so ashamed or tense or uncomfortable, they're not taking in what you're saying anyway. So you're basically putting words out there that are going nowhere. So once you're aware of all of this and all the different ways that humor and laughing, like you were saying, you can show up differently to how you support yourself. You can use humor intentionally in different ways. You can show up differently with your kids. You can show up differently with people. So it's really helpful to understand all of this.
So if you've been listening to us for a while, we get a lot of questions about what to do in tricky parenting or relationship moments.
Yeah, and if I'm being real, I'm asking Alona those same questions all the time. I get into those same tricky moments as everybody else does. And as much as we wish we could be there for each other in those exact moments, we just can't always be.
Yeah, that's why we partnered with the amazing team at Connectin to create a coach called Amari. And we didn't just lend our names, we helped build it and train it and brought in everything we've learned about emotional healing, connection, and communication.
Yeah, we spent years training and learning, and we've created Amari, who is so calm and grounded, listens deeply and responds with warmth, clarity, and compassion. There's no judgment, no reactivity. In fact, we tasked our children with trying to get Amari reactive, and they still haven't succeeded. It's just steady support when you need it most.
We use it ourselves all the time, especially when we feel stuck or overwhelmed. And Amari's really helped us pause, reflect, given us insight that helps us come back to each other.
Yeah, we designed Amari to help you strengthen the relationships that matter most, starting with the one you have with yourself.
And we are so excited that you can try it now at webeparents.com and click on We Be Connectin with a K to sign up. And when you have your Amari moment, please let us know, as we'd love to hear about it.
As I was listening to Chris, was also thinking how there are so many opportunities where we can implement this into our own lives and with our own girls, and especially Kylie, who has a tendency to step into more easily into shame, and because she's really strong internal critic, that laughter, that inviting that humor and kind of lessening the moment or lightening the moment can help her and me regulate our nervous systems and kind of create this sense in the room that, okay, this is not a great situation, but we're okay. Now we're going to figure it out.
So just letting you know, hey, there's a need for regulation and being able to support that and move forward with confidence.
Well, we talk about that, right? We talk about, I think even in medicine, there's validity to the fact that laughter can be really healing, that laughter stimulates that nervous system, stimulates that rest, digest, parasympathetic, thriving.
Safety.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, when you're really laughing and present is different than when you're socially uncomfortable and using laughter to mask that. So some people might say, oh, well, I'm laughing when I'm uncomfortable, but that's different than the laughing that we're talking about. Like when we went to go see Puppet Up and we're there and we left and we're laughing the whole time and our whole bodies felt restored. We were present, connected, and then continued to build on that connection, just talking about the show afterwards.
Yeah. And the many different ways that humor was expressed there as well. Humor to lighten an awkward situation, humor to laugh at each other, at oneself, humor to make people laugh and to invite them to a space of joy, experiencing joy and connection together. Really neat to see the many ways that humor can amplify and enhance our life. I always felt, humor feels nice and joking feels nice and laughing feels great. But I don't think I quite connected to how valuable and how versatile it can be in our lives.
So you're going to have to start joking even more?
I know. I'm going to have to get funny. I need to connect with Chris around.
You're going to take funny lessons?
Yes. We actually talked to Chris about that, which I'm really excited about. We're going to invite him back and we're going to, and I invite the listeners to help us out with that. We're going to share with him some awkward situations that have come up with, between me and Matt or between us and one of our daughters or both of our daughters or even our parents. And, ask Chris. It's an ask Chris. How would you change this? How would you put humor in this?
Right. How would you say this in a more connected way through humor? So telling someone you don't like what they made for dinner or you don't like the gift they got.
Or what they're wearing or the amount of device time that they're using.
Or they're talking too much. So imagine any judgment. And then how could I can do it with nonviolent communication. But it'll be interesting to see how you can connect it through humor too. Yeah.
And one more thing there are many things, but another thing that I really enjoyed with Chris was he shared a story about his son, where, Chris was actually being serious and bringing up something serious, and his son tried to pass it off with a joke. And rather than getting upset or feel disrespected or take it personally or like his needs didn't matter, Chris connected to, that's exactly what I did when I was a kid, And then he brought it back into connection and said, now we're serious. So jokes aside. And, still maintain that boundary, but didn't sacrifice the connection. And I was thinking about that, I think part of what allowed him to do that was his growing up in a family that also utilized humor regularly in the family, connection and communication dynamic, and allowing for those messy situations to be accepted and mistakes to be made and finding the humor in it. Rather than, that's really a tool that I think sits so nicely in the collaborative parenting space.
I'm still stuck on did I really say that that you didn't have a sense of humor?
I'm so excited. I know you did say that. See, I'm passing it over because I've heard it so many times and it's disregarded, but I'm laughing at myself at the moment.
That's painful. Well, I apologize. I have to repair. Do I need to repair, or are we past that?
We're all good.
All right.
This is for those listeners who are listening, they don't see us, but because we were interviewing Chris, we're actually sitting together, which is a novelty. Usually we sit in different locations. And so before the podcast started, with gentle humor, Matt said, "Don't look at me, look straight ahead." And here I am, like, looking at you throughout the video. So here, a moment to laugh at myself. Awesome. So what do we want to leave? There, I did it again. What do we want to leave the listeners with today? What wrap up?
Well, even without Chris here, what I'm grateful for where the conversation took us. It just reminds me how important it is to stay curious about why we're laughing and what might be underneath it. I think there's so much more that you can get out of humor at the right time. Even, our friend Mark, who's sort of a connection coach, healer, what he says is using humor at the right moments. He'll compliment that when he says, I'll sort of insert humor at the right times to sort of increase the experience of empathy, or sort of disarm some of the discomfort. So it's this balance where times where humor can really help and other times where it can land really flat. And just like empathy, where you're sort of tuning into the other person and then pivoting based on what's going to support the connection. Humor, to me, I'm seeing now as another, quote unquote tool that you can use to either enhance connection or take away from connection. Because even empathy, a lot of people think that, you can never go wrong with empathy. But have you ever given someone empathy where they don't want empathy?
I have.
Maybe they want sympathy. Maybe they want advice. Maybe they don't want, they don't want anything right now. And that's real. So it's not that one size always fits all as far as connection. And that, to me, I'm just excited to see humor in this different way.
Yeah. And I think the invitation is to not be afraid, because sometimes when you hear, humor can build connection or it can deter it. If it doesn't land well, there's almost a fear to test it out or try it or make the mistake. But I think that was one of the many lessons that I took from our last conversation with Chris was the value of connecting through humor, even when it's messy, even when it doesn't land well, and not to throw the baby out with the bathwater just because one time it didn't land or one time it created a mess. The many beautiful things that can come out of incorporating more humor in the family dynamic or in the relationship dynamic, the ability to be more authentic in awkward situations, because things that would make you uncomfortable to bring up, you find that gateway in through a joke.
I did that a lot in my family.
Mm-hmm.
We use humor a lot to disarm discomfort or awkwardness. I find that pretty helpful.
Yeah.
Almost naming what everybody's feeling, but not talking about. I find that I use humor a lot in that, particularly with my family.
Yeah. I'm like nodding as I'm thinking. My brother does that a lot too.
Yes.
Especially because my sister and I can be hotheads sometimes. And he'll just come in and deflate the hot air that is building in the room, by throwing in a joke or giving yourself a way out almost,
Yeah, and that works even better, I think, sometimes. So, for example, if somebody snaps and you could do a perfect nonviolent communication response and say, hey, when you just responded that way, I felt a little bit hurt or, put off, and it doesn't really meet my need for respect and care. So would you be willing to say it with a little less tone? Whatever. That's a classical NVC response. You can, change the words, or you could be like, whoa, coming in hot, or, snap much, why don't you try again, or anything like that, where the humor actually could be more connecting than a nonviolent communication response.
Yes. I absolutely agree with that. I think and I named it before, but I think one of the things that humor can really do so well is disintegrate that sense of shame. That sometimes, even in using NVC, when somebody hears your reaction to something or your thoughts around something, it can still be received more easily as criticism, which can stimulate that sense of shame and getting small, versus in humor, it almost welcomes the mess in a sense. And yeah, so I'm really taking that. That's something that I know I'm perseverating on and maybe repeating it, but I just find that really valuable. And I think for me, I really want to try and practice and bring more humor into situations.
So you're going to start being funnier? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, I'm going to try. I need to get some joke books. I don't know how naturally funny I am.
This episode of We Be Parents is brought to you by We Be Calm, the child calmer designed by doctors and loved by parents.
Struggling with bedtime routines or managing your child's anxiety? We Be Calm transforms deep breathing into a fun and engaging activity, helping kids find their inner calm. Perfect for bedtime stressful moments or anytime your child needs a little extra help to stay calm. Visit webecalm.com to learn more and bring tranquility to your family. We Be Calm, because we be in this together.
What about we come up with some situations now? We'll see how you respond with humor.
Oh, please. I'm not ready.
What about if, let's think of one. What would be a good one to practice? With the kids or with me? What would be harder where humor might be helpful? The kids respond well to humor.
The kid, well,
maybe to my humor.
No, definitely not to your humor. But yes, they do respond better. They do respond well to humor. I think, one thing that came up for me right now is I think sometimes I would worry that in a heated situation, since it's not part of our family culture or dynamic, that shooting in, a joke might actually fuel the fire a little bit more, because it's almost like, oh, you're not taking this seriously, or you're laughing at me, or really you think this is the time for a joke.
What if we're bickering? Do you think humor would be helpful if we're bickering? There's times where we'll just bicker about something and one of us will say, we're just bickering. We just need to stop for a second here. And then we come back.
I think
that would be a good place.
I think even if it gets messy, it's something that over time is beneficial. Because I think initially it depends how resourced. It depends when.
Right.
If I'm really not resourced or really attached to whatever I'm bickering about, I'm not going to receive humor probably as well. But that's not indicative of it being a poor choice to bring it into the situation. That's indicative of the fact that I'm under-resourced and not available for it at the moment. But I think it's a muscle that you have to build, and there has to be trust around it. And the trust is that we are using it to bridge connection, not to,
put the other person down.
Right. Put the other person down, or use humor as a way to say things that are hurtful and you wouldn't say otherwise.
But if we were bickering and I said something like, I think we're bickering because deep down, I'm right. And it's just hard to get there.
Yes, when you're that ridiculous, and I know that there's no way that could be true, because you're never right. No, I'm kidding.
Or what if if we started bickering and you started breaking into like an English accent, and you say, "Oh, when we bicker, I go into my English accent."
Yes, I think that would be funny.
I think that'd be funny too.
Remember Eeyore?
Eeyore, yes,
Oh,
poo, right? That would be good. Or like when one of my favorite lines in Frasier is when he says, I just need a minute to get down off my high horse.
Yes. Yes.
So the humor, he used it a lot in the show.
Yes.
When he was like, feeling a little shame or wanting to acknowledge that he made a mistake but couldn't.
Yes.
So
yes, and that's a really good point. It's even a way to ease your own shame or to name your own shame in a way that feels more acceptable.
Yeah, I think we've said that to each other, where we say, I know you're right, but I need more time before I can say that out loud or something like that.
Yes.
We'll do it sometimes.
Yes.
All right.
And just to give the audience context around OPU, when Matt and I first met, I was probably on the side of Pollyanna, very optimistic.
And I was probably on the side of finding the glass is half empty.
Yeah. And every time that we kind of clashed in that way, I would look at Matt and, like Eeyore, say, "Oh, poo." And he, in the same way that he just did now, he would start smiling. And it really helped to kind of disarm that situation.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm connecting to that. I like that. Next time we start bickering.
So you go into an English accent.
I will.
And I will point out how deep down I'm right. And you're just not there yet.
See, I'm already laughing.
See, you're laughing at that.
I love it. All right. Well, audience, we invite you guys to practice that as well.
Send us, if you can, things that you would want to say but aren't comfortable saying or are worried they're going to land poorly. And then we're going to put that on the list to translate with humor.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you, everyone, for listening. If you can, please take the time to leave us a review. Let us know how we're doing. Let us know what you'd like to hear and what you'd like us to talk about. Share your story or a question for us to answer. We would love to hear from you at parents@webetogether.com. Again, that's parents@webetogether.com.
And join us next week as we continue exploring all different ways to help families increase connection within them.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.